Laurent-Perrier is one of the last family-owned champagne house. It all started as an observation. You have the chance tonight to taste something unique. These are not wines you taste every day, we think. I do, but it's my own problem. So I hope this is what you're going to take from that. It's the unicity of the wine.
Hello and welcome to the Cellar Road Podcast. My name is Anna.
I'm Adam.
And we are super excited to share a very cool conversation we have had with Edouard Cossy, the Global Director for the Grand Siecle for Champagne House Laurent-Perrier.
Yes. Grand Siecle is Laurent-Perrier's prestige label. Edouard was visiting the Mid-Atlantic region and came and visited with us here in Charlottesville. While he was here, we hosted a masterclass and paired wine dinner. And what follows is the recording of the masterclass and our conversation with Edouard. And we're thrilled to be able to share that with you. And we look forward to our next visit with Laurent-Perrier. Cheers.
Cheers.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to stand up. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Adam Wagner, and Anna and I are so excited to have you with us tonight here at the Alley Light for what will be a remarkable evening. We are honored to welcome Edouard from Laurent-Perrier. Edouard is the Global Director of the Grand Siecle program, and we are going to learn a lot more about what that means tonight. So really excited to be here. I do want to just shout out to Anna really quickly. So this event doesn't, events like this don't come together easily, and they certainly don't come together easily when half of your team has twins 3 weeks before this event. So I wanted to thank Anna for really stepping up and making this happen tonight. I do have baby pictures. They're available on demand. Without further ado, though, I want us to get started and welcome Edouard.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah.
So if we want to start, we can talk a little bit about, I think we should start with a house. Let's talk a little bit about Laurent-Perrier first, and then we'll go from there.
Definitely. So to say a few words about the house, Laurent-Perrier is one of the last family-owned champagne house. We've been starting business in 1812 under the coverage of the Laurent and Perrier family, so two names that got together to create Laurent-Perrier house, and started to be extremely successful and known for creating also new wines in Champagne, especially the Grand Vin sans sucre, which was known to be one of the very first champagne wines without any sugar. But unfortunately, as you know, the beginning of the 20th century has been difficult in Europe. So we went through several wars, and just before the Second World War, the inheritance, Mathilde Émilie Perrier, she decides to sell the company by auction because she doesn't feel to continue the business of her mother. And so there's another family back in the days, the Nonancourt family, that has a lot of connections with the Lançon family, looking for a house to transmit to the sons. And that's what's going to happen. 1939, there's the acquisition from Marie-Louise Lançon de Nonancourt, and she's going to give the company after the Second World War to her son, Bernard. And he's the one that's going to make this very little house located in the small but Grand Cru village, one of the latest great success in Champagne due to, let's say, great innovations and great creations made by his vision of trying to be different from the other in Champagne. So.
Yeah, and the Nonancourts have really continued that legacy of innovation, it seems. The house first to ferment steel.
Yeah, used stainless steel, introduced the brut nature method.
Exactly. There was a lot of moves that first were motivated by the idea to be different from the others. And I think, first, all of the wines created have always been created for a good reason. They have to be pioneering their own category. So Bernard started with a brut, demi-sec, and a vintage. He decided to renew the style of the house, to go more into Chardonnay as a majority grape that would be the majority component in every single wine, except the rosés that are Pinot Noir based. And then trying to bring a new sound to this Champagne Symphony that was already a very competitive environment. And so, so the first wine that he created was Grand Siecle. I think we're going to talk a lot about it tonight. But then afterwards, they decided to also renew a category that was a little bit overlooked by the industry, known as the rosé category, by bringing a different way to make this rosé by skin contact maceration. Also giving a proper presentation with a very nice shaped bottle. And he launched the Cuvée Rosé in 1968. It's probably the wine that has also helped to create the reputation of Laurent-Perrier. And then after that, there were some other innovations. As you mentioned, we also been pioneering a category that was not yet existing in Champagne, which is the Brut Nature category, also known as zero dosage. And in 1981, we launched the very first Brut Nature in Champagne under the name Ultra Brut. And there was also some other creations afterwards. We also been trying to create a even more premium rosé. So Alexandra Rosé was actually one of them by being a very unusual rosé because the process is to macerate Pinot Noir, but also Chardonnay, co-macerating together. And we have to wait for special conditions in terms of harvest. And so far, only 10 harvests has given us the opportunity to create that wine. Mm-hmm. And more lately, we have been asked for many, many years, as I mentioned, Chardonnay is very the grape we love. We are very a Chardonnay house, Chardonnay driven. And we have been asked by many from the trade, from journalists, etc. Why don't you have a Blanc de Blanc? And we were like, problem is like, if you take the Chardonnay from somewhere, you may compromise the quality of the other wine. So you need to secure first the sourcings and be sure about what you're going to obtain. And if it was about creating a Blanc de Blanc that would be just a copycat from the others, there would be no point for us. We never follow trends, we create them, or we don't do it. Yeah. And we have been trying to consider what we could achieve. And the idea actually was to melt, I would say, blend, two know-how from the house, the Chardonnay with the Blanc de Blanc, and also the Brut Nature. And we released in 2019 Blanc de Blanc, zero dosage, Blanc de Blanc Nature, which was known as being one of the very first in Champagne among the Grand Marque category.
Great.
Very cool.
Well, Champagne really has two kind of primary lanes that everybody drives down, right? We have the house-style non-vintage wine, and then we have a lot of houses that are producing vintage champagnes. And we are starting with one of those tonight. So I would love to, I don't want them to wait too long before we start drinking champagne tonight.
I talk a lot.
Everybody's throats are dry, so let's get started. So let's talk about the 2012.
Yeah.
Alors 2012, in Champagne, you have to locate, know the fact that Champagne is the most northern wine region in France. And for this reason, we have a climate which is very different from the other wine regions, very different from Bordeaux, from Burgundy, from Rhone Valley. And for this reason, I will give you actually an example. Last year, exactly the same day today, it was about 30 degrees on the vines. Today, it was 22 degrees. So we do have a lot of temperatures of differences from one harvest to another. And for this reason, we do have harvest that could be very complicated in terms of level of acidity and maturity, but also great years sometimes that happen to be good enough to be declared as a single vintage. So the Champagne people has invented this concept of blending harvests together to create non-vintage style that will allow us, to guarantee the consistency of the quality and the style through the year. So most of the Champagne produced in the region are actually non-vintages. But when we have a good harvest, then we also authorize ourselves to create an expression of that year, that specific vintage. And that's what we introduce you today with 2012. Mm-hmm. So all the grapes are coming from one single year. And we try to share our understanding of that vintage and adapt the style of the year to the style of the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And 2012 is one of the best years in Champagne in recent history.
One
correct?
Of them, yes. One of them, for various reasons. I would say first, you have a level of acidity that allows us to consider that it's going to be a very long aging potential wine. Also, at the same time, offering a high level of maturity and a lot of, to me, a lot of gourmandise. It's a very generous year. Yeah. It's funny because for me, it's like quite unusual to have such a high level of fruit in a wine. It was a very low crop, low yield. Unfortunately, we went through a lot of difficult episodes on the vineyards. Late frost in April, we had also a huge storm in July, and what was remaining on the vines was not even reaching the appellation. Appellation is the yield that you can actually harvest. Maximum yield was not even reached, but the quality was actually very good.
Mm. This is just so bright.
In terms of composition, we are always showing the two major grapes of Champagne, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, at equal levels, so 50% each. And this one will be coming from the cru, the villages that we think are the most representative of the style of the year. It's usually Grand Cru only. And for this one, we actually have happened to acquire land in Rilly-la-Montagne, which is a Premier Cru.
Yeah.
And we thought that the result was so exceptional that we decided to integrate it on the blend.
Nice. So if one of the points of a vintage champagne is to capture a near perfect year in the bottle, how do you think this champagne captures that year?
I think the vintages in Champagne are so different from one to another
Yeah.
that what we're trying to do is to get the best of it,
Yes.
of what you had to tell. That's why, first, this is the first answer I would say. The quality is oriented for sure, but also at Laurent-Perrier we do a lot of, we are very careful about timing and aging. We do a lot of long aging on lees. Our style is pretty reductive. We have talked about stainless steel. Laurent-Perrier was the first house to fully change the production from concrete tanks to stainless steel in 1973. Getting inspired by the dairy business, because at that time there was no stainless steel vats in Champagne, so we were the first one to get them. And the idea was to actually show that if you treat the vinification on the right side, like having cool temperature, slowing down the fermentation so that you can maximize the extraction of aromas while remaining also extremely fresh and young, you could guarantee the preservation of the wines on a very long-term way. And anything we do, from the moment we harvest the grapes till the moment you open the bottles, we open the bottles, is to make sure the wine is not going to be overexposed to oxygen, to preserve this long-term aging potential. So that is offering us the possibility to age our wine longer. And we are convinced about the fact that the longer you age the wines, the more complexity is going to be developed. So even our non-vintage is actually aged for 4 years. Our vintage is 10. We are usually the last one to release a vintage because, we do much longer aging than the others, because our wines also need to age for a longer time. So when it comes to 2012, basically we had no choice to wait 10 years because the wine was in need of it if we wanted to reach this right aromatic complexity that we are looking for. And that's why we also don't vintage so many years. If I look back in history, since 1950 to 2012, we have made 30 vintage.
Wow.
Over the same period of time, the whole Champagne region has made 49. So it's 19 years less declared as a vintage because we thought that this 19 remaining were either not good enough in terms of quality for both grapes, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, or the aging potential was not really there. That's what is motivating our decision to declare a vintage.
Okay.
Great.
Cool.
And how long do you expect this 2012 to, how long would you expect it to sit in a cellar before it's reaching its, obviously it's delicious to drink now.
Yeah.
Well,
But how long would you let it sit before you?
The great thing with Champagne is we release wines when we consider they're ready. So it's definitely ready to be enjoyed. Then if you look at the vibrancy of the wine, the energy that you have in the glass, you can definitely expect the wines to last for another 10 or 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah.
For sure. It's without no problem.
Awesome. It's still super bright and lively with a ton of red apple and stone fruit and some green apple in there. And even as it sits in the glass and opens up, it just deepens and is really just a pleasure to drink.
Absolutely. That's what I find really interesting about the Laurent-Perrier is you've mentioned this. It's there's an efficiency to the excellence of the house. Most houses have to kind of experiment around excellence until they reach it. And the Laurent-Perrier, it seems like nothing comes out of the house that's not at the top level.
We do experiment, but you don't know.
We don't release it, right?
We don't see any of it.
It's not on our shelf. So the 2012 being one of the most exceptional years, I'm curious for you, what are some of your favorite vintages that aren't the 2012?
The interesting part is they are so different from one to another. Right. 2012 to me was a kind of surprise. I was not expecting such a high level of fruitiness and generosity on the flavors. So it's like an instant charming wine that you have no other option than to appreciate and to enjoy it. There are some other vintages that are a little bit more shy, but with time, they tend to deliver a story that is extremely interesting. I like 7 for this reason. For me, it's a great vintage. 8, I think, is now starting to tell a story that I start to really appreciate. For many, it has been like a super great vintage, etc. Depending on the style of the houses, yes, sometimes it was interesting, but I feel that now it's starting to deliver its full potential. And then there are some other vintages like 2002 and 1996 that were more, and 1990 as well, that were extraordinary vintage to enjoy, especially when you taste them now, because you understand that they are still alive. It's crazy how they manage to preserve their own energy. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be tired at all.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's like no secret that we're here to drink some prestige champagne and prestige cuvee.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, and one thing that I really appreciate about Laurent-Perrier is the innovation that you guys bring, and especially the innovation within the prestige cuvee category, with the Grand Siecle being a vintage, non-vintage champagne. Because most prestige cuvées we typically think of as being vintage. So, we're drinking the 2012. And that's what we would think of as usually being a champagne house's prestige cuvée.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so thinking of that, drinking the vintage, moving on to number 26, iteration number 26 of the Grand Siecle, what are you trying to capture in the Grand Siecle?
Alors, it all started as an observation. The decades of the 50s and the 60s is really the time of champagne history where most of the prestige cuvée actually appeared on the market. There was a demand for more premium wines. And when deciding to make its own prestige cuvée, Bernard de Nonancourt observed what was happening in Champagne. And thanks to this observation, he understood that first, not every year is good enough to be a vintage. And when a vintage comes and deserving to be declared as a single year, then the quality or the style can be very different to another. There was no consistency at all. And it was even more marked back in the days than now. And so he was looking for, he had a dream of this perfect, let's say perfect wine, but actually a quality that he could not find, neither on blending every harvest, nor just focusing on one single year. And then he understood that actually this vintage that actually is so different from one to another, they are also very complementary. And so he understood that by using the blend, he could actually create a quality that a single vintage could never be able to deliver.
Yeah.
That's what we call the perfect year. The perfect year won't be able to be delivered by nature, by a single vintage. And what nature cannot create, we decided to try to create that perfection.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to found the right profile of aromatic complexity, also of freshness. And by doing some test experimentation, he basically started to isolate some wines coming from certain Grand Cru, coming from certain vintage, and create the very first blend of Grand Siecle in 1959. That was based on 3 vintages, 1955 as a majority, completed by 1953 and 1952. And since then, because of these rules, these principles, we have not been able to make more than 26 times this wine in 70 years, to release 26 times this wine in 70 years.
Wow. Wow.
Well, let's get started with the latest.
Yeah.
This is number 26.
This is the current release, indeed, the latest. So based on the Harvest 2012, the single vintage 2012. Alors, to precise, because I know some of you may think that it's coming from the same wines as the first wine we had. It's not the case. When we select the still wines to create the different blends, the most representative will be going for the vintage. But when it comes to Grand Siecle, we take actually a profile of wines that are much tighter, but we feel that there is a lot of potential. And coming from certain Grand Cru that has the right aromatic profile that we're looking for. Not all of them. We have 17 Grand Cru in Champagne. We have only in mind about 11 being the maximum we ever used in the whole story of Grand Siecle. This one has only 8, because these 8 were representing what we try to look for, to recreate. But the 3 others were not actually fitting the style of this specific profile that we are looking for.
Nice.
Could you talk a little bit about that profile? What is the profile of Grand
Alors,
Siecle?
it's clear, because there was always something mentioned by Bernard de Nonancourt, and it was really clear in his mind what he wanted to reach. It's to obtain the maximum aromatic complexity possible, but never fall down into heaviness, and maintain this great freshness and vibrancy through time.
Yeah.
So guaranteeing that there would be, I told you that there was a long aging potential behind the vintage, it's even more true for Grand Siecle. And when we taste the vin clair, what we look for in terms of taste, you probably have, I'm not sure if you have tasted vin clair before in your life, but it's very, very narrow in terms of aromatic profile. Yeah. And this citrusy is really the aspect that we are looking for, something like a blade, extremely oriented into citrus aromas. And it's a lot of wines to taste for sure, but the cellar master, Michel Fauconnet, has a very good and clear idea about what he wants to reach. There's a lot of memory behind. We have the chance to have only known 3 cellar masters since 1948. So basically, he's been in the company since 1973. I won't say his age because otherwise I will have problems. But he was born the same year as Grand Siecle. Voilà.
Somebody can do the quick math, yeah.
So basically he has the memory, of course. He worked with the 2 previous cellar masters. He knows exactly what he's doing. So this is very consistent as a profile.
Yeah. So the 26 is base wine is the 2012 vintage,
2012,
right?
yeah.
With 2008 and 2007.
Yes.
So 2012 was a very giving vintage in terms of its fruit profile. Mm-hmm. And if we're trying to recreate like the perfect year, what is 2007 and 2008 bringing to the 2012?
They have their own characteristics. They have their own profile. I said, and we can feel it in the vintage, that 2012 is quite rich and generous, but not lacking of acidity. Also bringing this vibrancy to the wines. 8 came as a wine that had also quite aromatic, but not as much as 2012, and came with an extraordinary structure. Okay, so putting a frame, like a backbone on the wine. And we found that it was actually very complementary to bringing a density as well to the wine that 12 alone could never actually reach. And then you had 7, and 7 is one of the vintage I like as well because it's very sharp, it's very mineral, and you have that hint of freshness that is complementary to the 2 previous one I mentioned. So the 3 of them are like street children. So they're very different to one to another, but together they create that complexity that you could not find in just one single of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a very beautiful wine.
When you spoke about the depth of this wine, and you can immediately, that depth is immediate on your palate.
Yeah.
And those secondary and tertiary notes are coming through beautifully, and it's just gorgeous. The toffee that comes through on this is maybe one of my favorite notes.
Yeah, but it's still like bright and fresh fruit, and none of that like liveliness has been lost, even with the extended time and aging that this wine sees.
Right.
It's usually a wine that doesn't look like his age. Can you say
Yeah.
that?
Yes. Yeah.
A bit like me.
Yeah.
But it's true that when you taste it and when you understand that within this wine you have 2012, 8, and 7.
Yeah.
And it's going to be even more the case with the other wines we're going to have afterwards. Mm-hmm. It shows always, that's the first comment we have is like it's a very fresh and young, and then it's evolving into more secondary and tertiary aromas.
Yeah. I am curious to explore the difference between the Grand Siecle and a house-style champagne, because both are technically non-vintage champagnes. Where like a house-style champagne is supposed to be one like I can open La Cuvée today and then open it in 5 years, and it should hopefully taste the same, and I always know what I'm going to get in terms of quality and flavor profile. Is that something we would expect, especially in the Grand Siecle, especially if we are to compare 26 with 23?
Alors, no, for several reasons. I think what is important to remind is like when we make Grand Siecle, as much as when we make La Cuvée, when we taste these wines, when we blend them together, we think, the cellar master thinks, that this is going to give the same results after the second fermentation and after the aging time on lees. But you have components in Grand Siecle that obviously are going to influence the evolution of the wines through time. So they will certainly have a signature of the majority vintage. I'm talking about 26, for instance. There is a signature of 2012 to me on that one.
Completely.
And
Completely.
23, same story, as also a signature of 2006 in this one. So they will, at the beginning, they can be extremely close from one to another. 2 iterations can be very close, but with time, they will take their own path, their own direction, and giving their own personality, but maintaining at the same time a common path, a common style that you can instantly recognize.
Yeah.
For a non-vintage, it's a different story. We don't select the elements the same way. We have to deal with what we have. And so it's a complete different way of considering wine. Grand Siecle, we build it around what we select. The non-vintage, we make it with what we have. So it's a different approach, but indeed, the idea is to have a consistency through time so that you don't notice that the wine could be changing from 1 year to 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
That's the best compliment you can make to a cellar master.
Yes.
Like you don't see a difference. It's been always the same taste for the last 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So 2 different approach. We build a wine with Grand Siecle, and it's really a construction. And with the non-vintage, we try to make the best of what we have, which is not exactly the same, if you follow me.
Yeah. No, completely.
So what are some of, for you at least, what are some of the notes that you hope the 26 is imparting for people when they're tasting the wine?
Ah, you mean the tasting notes?
Yeah.
I talked about this citrus flavor that I always have instantly when I taste it. So obviously, you have lemon, lime, depending on how sensitive you are with this level with this kind of aromas. We all have our own library. My library of flavors is probably very different from the rest of the crowd here. So it's very personal. But I would say if you go to les fruits à noyaux, peach, that kind of aromas, pears as well. You can have a bit of apple as well. And then going into the tertiary aromas, you can start to have some notes of honey, for instance, that start also to develop. It will come later on when you open your glass for about 1 hour or 2. This is starting to be extremely evocative. So that's a quite complex layers of flavor you have. We had one day a comment from a very, very known, very famous sommelier that told us that Grand Siecle is probably the only wine he ever had that had in the same glass primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas.
Yeah.
And we are very proud of this compliment because it really shows that I think we are on the good direction by let's say adding this complexity coming to the blend of vintages rather than just using one single year.
Yeah. So then for the 23, what are the vintage compositions in this one?
Alors, the vintage composition is based on the vintage 2006 with a majority of 2006 completed by 2004 and 2002. What is interesting of the lineup that we have in front of us is that we have also different formats.
Yeah.
And Grand Siecle is a wine that is in demand of aging on lees for a long time. First, to reach the right aromatic complexity that we're looking for, but second as well, the balance between the vintages. This vintage I mentioned just before, 12, 8, and 7, they have different level of power. And if we want to be sure that the wine is well integrated, we have to wait enough time. And that's a minimum of 10 years on lees for 26. That can be changing. The previous iteration, 25, was in need. I had the chance to taste it before it was, like much before it was released. And we realized that the wine was not ready. Why? Because 08 was taking the full room, the full space. 6 and 7 were like hidden in the corner and without anything to say. So we had to wait more years. There's nothing much to do but tasting.
Yeah.
And so when it's usually 10 years, for 25 we had to wait 12 years of aging on lees.
Wow.
So we like to play.
Yeah.
As soon as the wine is ready, the wine is commanding. The wine is commanding. This is the decision is taken from the wine, not from us. So when it's ready, we release it.
Yeah.
And the chance we have tonight is like we have an expression of Grand Siecle in Magnum.
Yeah.
And as you probably know, Magnum is its own environment. Right. And there's a factor that is extremely impactful to the wine, which is basically the amount of oxygen you have in a Magnum compared to a bottle, which is actually the same quantity. So the space between the cork and the wine in a 75 cl and the 150 cl is the same quantity. But since you have twice more amount of wine in a magnum rather than a bottle, what's going to happen? It's just going to slow down the aging. So if you want to reach this result that we have in mind, the balance between the vintages and the aromatic complexity, we have to wait longer for the magnum to age. And we will never release, on this observation, we will never release magnums of the same and bottles of the same iteration at the same time. So when the 26 was aged for 10 years, actually the 23 is aged for 16 years on the cellars.
Wow.
If we want to reach that result, that's complexity, that's the balance between the vintage, that was a minimum of 16 years. That's the current release on the magnum size. So you can imagine that the magnums of 26, they are not hidden somewhere here, they are still in our cellars. And that has an impact on the wine as well, because the longer you leave wine on lees, that's going to have an impact on the aromatic development. It's going to be even more multi-layered. And also, that's going to affect the texture of the wine. So the textural sensation of the magnum is really a signature of that format. And that basically means that the same blend of Grand Siecle, when it is bottled, so 75 cl and 150 cl, when we bottle these wines in different formats, they will also show, when ready, different expression. Not exactly the same. So there is an expression of Grand Siecle in bottle, and there is an expression of Grand Siecle in bottle of the same iteration.
Yeah. So all I'm hearing is I should buy a bottle of the 26 and just hang on to it till the Magnum.
Of course, man.
Okay. yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
So we've had this unique opportunity to taste two of the Grand Siecle. We've had the vintage, and now we're somehow stepping it up even more. Somehow we're doing it even better. So let's talk a little bit about Reserve.
Alors, les réserves is a third expression of these iterations. It's a third way to show that there could be a difference between the bottle expression, the magnum expression. That's the third expression that we happen to have discovered by a milestone in the company, which was the bicentenary of the house, where we have decided to serve to the guests some wines taken from a special batch in the cellar, which was a personal reserve of Bernard de Noncourt himself. And he had a bottle for himself without telling anyone. He was a very naughty man. He had bottle for himself magnums, and for the first time, without telling anyone, Jeroboams. Jeroboams of Grand Siecle. Right. And there was a batch. There
Molly,
was a batch.
You have one of those, right?
And there was this batch, so in very limited quantity, as you can imagine. That was decided. So Alexandra and Stéphanie and Michel went down, tasted the wine, so it's perfect to serve such a big date as the bicentenary. We have to serve something special, and it was actually served during the party. And there were some remaining magnums and Jeroboams afterwards, after this 3 days of party, and the decision was actually taken to continue this experimentation of, an even more prolonged aging on lees of these special formats. And by the year of 2017, we decided to release these magnums and Jeroboams of a third expression of Grand Siecle under the name Les Réserves, because they were coming from the special reserve in the cellars after 20 years of aging on lees.
Wow.
And that was with iteration number 17. So the base vintage were 95, 93, and 1990. And suddenly there was another taste, another expression. Of course, the same profile, but something more, not a more accomplished, because it was just a different expression. I would not say more accomplished. It was just a different interpretation of that iteration. And for the second time in the house history, we are in capacity to release another iteration under Les Réserves, and that's what we have in front of us. That's Les Réserves number 20, with wine only dating back from the 20th century. So 1999, 1997, and 1996. And they were aged for 23 years on lees.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know. It's like,
There are beaucoup de choses là. There's a lot of things.
yeah.
It's very
The
complete.
complexity on that is
Yeah.
insane.
It's almost
Yeah.
undescribable.
Right. We could have spent an hour talking about this wine.
Yeah, we could have.
I'll have it.
Only this one. One thing I am incredibly impressed with is, even though the extended lees aging time, that it's still so bright and light and like lively, and the acidity is still present.
Yeah. Even if you just, if we take things by order, if you just look at the color, it's extremely difficult to make any difference between the 4 wines, and they don't have the same age at all. And that's for us a first sign of preservation potential. Then when you come into the wine, to me what is really, really surprising is that you still have these primary aromas that are still extremely present. For a wine of that age, it's quite difficult to reach. Again, I think I'm going to repeat myself, but we do anything we can to stay away from oxidation, specifically for this reason. Because we know the wines we're going to make have the capacity, they are built to age in the best conditions.
Those tertiary notes on this are just stunning. Talking about how wine is personal, it just reminds me of like toasted marshmallows.
Yeah.
You have the smokiness.
Yeah, the smokiness on this is lovely. Yeah.
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things in there. Which also means that the wine has the capacity to keep aging. Even after disgorgement, you can feel that also the wine is not tired at all.
No.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, I think what's remarkable about this is for a wine with a base of 97. This
99,
wine, 99. Yeah. This wine is extremely fresh.
Yeah.
It's very bright and acidic, and it retains that House Laurent-Perrier style of that acid-forward, beautiful wine. Wonderful.
Yeah. That's why for all of these aspects, that was really the idea of Bernard behind what we really wanted to reach, is to make a wine that was completely unique as a concept.
Yeah.
Unique in the aromatic development, unique in the freshness, unique in the aging potential. And so far, voilà, we still think that we are alone in this, we think we are alone in this kind of expression of champagne. And we will continue this way because we think this is the truth of the assemblage.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is exceptional. I think as we kind of wrap this portion up and start moving into service, for those of us, who are going to talk about this event to our friends and brag about it, what are some what's the elevator speech for Grand Siecle? What are the things that you want people to take away from this experience, knowing that maybe they didn't know when they walked in the room about this wine?
I think it's if I start by the beginning, I think, because I just mentioned that, I think you have the chance tonight to taste something unique, something that doesn't exist in any other house. We always wanted to be different. All of our wines are different, but this one really encapsulates the fact that if you are different, it doesn't mean you're going to be less good, or we think we're better, but voilà. We don't want to be pretentious. But but I think by considering another way, another path, you can definitely reach a much better quality than just trying to copy the others or be the same. So the chance we have tonight is to taste wine that first are extremely young, still extremely young in regards to their age, and I would say, since we have started to communicate a little bit more about Grand Siecle, also that these wines have been praised by the critics. And we got the chance, since we started to put the iteration number, so the number of the blend on the bottle, to receive a lot of extremely good scores, good accolades from the critics. And the chance we have is that there's no wines below 99 points here. So you have, beside the vintage. 26 was actually 100 points by James Suckling, and wine of the year in 2020 is still the wine of the year, 2023, among 39,000 wines. We were lucky enough to be considered that way because it was very well perceived by James. The 23 is 99 points, and the Les Réserves is 100 points as well. So, voilà, these are not wines you taste every day, we think. I do, but it's my problem. So, voilà. So I hope this is what you're going to take from that. It's the unicity of the wine. The chance of having wines that are quite difficult to find also because we don't make many of them. Right. It's quite scarce to produce, especially the Reserve.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank
walking
you.
us through these, and we're so excited to see what Chef has prepared to pair with these wines.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
indeed.
thank you, Edouard.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Merci
you.
beaucoup.
Thank you. Incredible. It's an incredible. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's eat.
I wasn't
you.
sure. I wasn't sure.
And we're clear.